Hello everyone again. It's good to see you, or well, I can't really see you, but you know what I mean. It's good to be present to you. Today I've chosen the Gospel reading of the walk to Emmaus, which in a way is being present to somebody without being seen, like you're being present to me now. I'm not really seeing you, am I? With this reading, Luke is the main gospel for this. The only other evangelist that speaks of this in a way is Mark, and he only speaks within 2 lines. So I'm going to read those 2 lines to you now. And it says, after this, he showed himself under another form to 2 of them as they were on their way into the country. These went back and told the others, who did not believe them either. Now they went back to the apostles, and it says they did not believe him either because previous to that they talked about Mary Magdalene, and she told them what she'd seen, and they didn't believe her. So when the 2 came back from Emmaus and told them, they did not believe either. So that's the only other evangelist that speaks of the walk to Emmaus, and as you saw, it was just in a couple of lines. So now I'm going to read to you from Luke, who has the very full version of this walk. That very same day, 2 of them were on their way to a village called Emmaus, 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking together about all that had happened. Now, as they talked this over, Jesus himself came up and walked by their side. But something prevented them from recognising him. He said to them, "What matters are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped short, their faces downcast. Then one of them, called Cleopas, answered him, "You must be the only person staying in Jerusalem who does not know the things that have been happening there these last few days." "What things?" he asked. "Well, all about Jesus of Nazareth," they answered. "He proved he was a great prophet by the things he said and did in the sight of God and of all the whole people. And how our chief priests and our leaders handed him over to be sentenced to death and had him crucified. Our own hope had been that he would be the one to set Israel free. And this is not all. 2 whole days have gone by since it all happened, and some women from our group have astounded us. They went to the tomb in the early morning, and when they did not find the body, they came back to tell us they had seen a vision of angels who declared he was alive. Some of our friends went to the tomb and found everything exactly as the women had reported, but of him they saw nothing." Then he said to them, "You foolish men, so slow to believe the full message of the prophets? Was it not ordained that the Christ should suffer and so enter into his glory? Then, starting with Moses and going through all the prophets, he explained to them the passages throughout the scriptures that were about himself. When they drew near to the village to which they were going, he made as if to go on, but they pressed him to stay with them. "It is nearly evening," they said, "and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them. Now, while he was with them at table, he took the bread and said the blessing. Then he broke it and handed it to them. And their eyes were opened and they recognised him, but he had vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us as he talked to us on the road and explained the scriptures to us?" They set out that instant and returned to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 assembled together with their companions, who said to them, "Yes, it is true. The Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon." And then they told their story of what had happened on the road and how they had recognised him at the breaking of the bread. So I thought today from this passage we might look at a few things, and one of them being, why did they not believe? I think sometimes we know that here we have two men who are grieving as they walk along. They're grieving the death of their friend. They're despondent about it. And of course they're afraid, as all the apostles were afraid at that time. After all, their leader had been crucified and they weren't sure how the authorities were going to deal with them. So these two men, grieving, despondent, afraid. Any hope they'd had in Jesus had been diminished by what had happened to him. So now they weren't sure how things could go on. And it's sometimes it's like us. We're walking along, we're despondent, our heads are down. We're not really taking much notice of anyone else. We're fully consumed with how we're feeling. And so it was with these two. From this, we follow the full story is where we find Cleopas and his companion. So we think first, yes, why didn't they believe? But then why didn't they recognise? So I know that myself, if I've ever felt really despondent, I know people have come beside me and I'm not really fully attentive to them. Perhaps you felt the same at some stage in your life. You know the presence is there, but you're not really attentive to it. I feel that's what was happening here. They probably didn't particularly want company either. I remember a friend of mine grieving, and she didn't want to go to the supermarket or anywhere. She didn't want people to see her or recognise her because she didn't want their sympathy or their love, because she knew she would get overly emotional and upset. Or sometimes we don't feel we want someone there with us. So these two, just walking along together, were probably quite happy with their own company and didn't really feel they needed somebody else with them. So they were despondent, they were heavy with grief, they were also disappointed. They say in the gospel there, our own hope had been that he was the one to set us free. So this was a disappointment that they were carrying also. Lots of emotions were filling them. And then we hear Jesus say, you foolish men. Now, why he said that, I don't really know. He meant you haven't ever taken in the full message that I was giving you, perhaps. But that catches their attention. As soon as he says, you foolish men, that must have lifted their faces from looking down at the road. Maybe then they're sort of half looking at him then, thinking, wow, why'd he say that? And of course, he goes on to talk about all the prophets and the meaning of everything that had happened. When they come near the house, it's getting dark, and so, as good people do and did in those days, you offer hospitality. It wasn't safe for an individual person to continue on walking those roads at night, because we've heard in other gospel passages about brigands and robbers waiting for travellers. And so they knew it wouldn't have been safe for this person to walk on by themselves, and in a spirit of hospitality, they asked him to stay. And it's in this meal that Jesus fully reveals himself to them. I'm going to share something with you from this book by Henri Nouwen, Bread for the Journey. It's a very old book of mine and it's been certainly well read. But there's two aspects I want to share with you from this book today. The first one is the idea of the intimacy, if you like, of the table. So when we sit with others and that intimacy that we have with these people we are sharing a meal with. Firstly, the hospitality was offered to Jesus. He took the hospitality up and then he sat with them and had a meal. Henri Nouwen says, the table is one of the most intimate places in our lives. It is there that we give ourselves to each other. When we say, take some more, let me serve you another plate, let me pour you another glass. Don't be shy, enjoy it. We say a lot more than what our words express. We invite our friends to become part of our lives. We want them to be nurtured by the same food and drink that nurture us. We desire communion with them. That is why a refusal to eat and drink what a host offers is so offensive. It feels like a rejection of an invitation to intimacy. Strange as it may sound, The table is the place where we want to become food for each other. Every breakfast, lunch, or dinner can become a time of growing communion with each other. So here Jesus is invited into this intimacy of their table. And we know that Jesus, breaking the bread, reveals himself. And so I want to share one other from this book, Jesus living within us. When we gather around the Eucharistic table and eat from the same bread and drink from the same cup, saying, "This is the body and blood of Christ," we become the living Christ here and now. Our faith in Jesus is not our belief that Jesus, the Son of God, lived long ago, performed great miracles, presented wise teachings, died for us on the cross, and rose from the grave. It first of all means that we fully accept the truth that Jesus lives within us and fulfills his divine ministry in and through us. This spiritual knowledge of the Christ living in us is what allows us to affirm fully the mystery of the incarnation, death, and resurrection as historic events. It is the Christ in us who reveals to us the Christ in history. I'm going to read the passage again, the gospel passage. I'm just going to pause a couple of times, and I want you to just perhaps put your own thoughts while I'm pausing. I'm not going to read it all, but I am going to read some of it. That very same day, I and my friend were on our way walking. We were quite downcast about the things that have been happening in our lives. Somebody came up beside us. The person asked us, "Oh, well, what things are you thinking about?" We tell the person. Now I'm just going to leave it there because we now have an image coming up on the screen, some music, and I want you to walk along, perhaps walk along with Jesus. Perhaps you want to tell him something today, or perhaps you want to walk along with him and listen to him. finish with this prayer. Lord, you walked the years of your life to comfort, to heal, to bless. Walk with me on my paths of my life. Bring me comfort, healing, and blessing. Amen. So thank you, everyone. I hope you're well. I hope this brings you comfort today. And may God bless you all. And goodbye.